So, chapter four of this book, we start to hear KP and his experience of going to Europe, and where we talked about culture shock already, but now he's actually going to explore his own culture shock of going to Europe as a Indian, came from poverty, and he's going to Europe for the first time. And so, what we're going to talk a lot about this one in just chapter four is this idea of wealth inequality. And I think what you're going to find is it's super surprising when you look on the global scale. So, what he had said is that he writes this on page 39. Westerners are more than just unaware of how much money they have, or affluence, fancy word for that. They almost seem to despise it, which is a harsh rebuke. And he says, and I would like to and I would discover again and again that this nation routinely takes its astonishing wealth for granted, which is kind of like a level charge when he's like, hey, I think these people in America, in the Western, they take their money for granted. Like they don't even realize how wealthy they are. And so I want to challenge you as we go through this is what do you guys think? Do you think you take your money for granted? Do you think you're extremely wealthy? Like right now, do you believe that you and your family are currently very wealthy, like extremely wealthy? Or do you believe that once you graduate, you get a career, that you're going to be wealthy, like super wealthy, like, having extra cars, throwing money around, having massive vacations, maybe a vacation home, two or three, being able to take these posh vacations. These are all Instagrammers, by the way, who make a ton of money per post, around $90,000 per ad. And so do you think that like your lifestyle, you're going to be super wealthy when you're finished? Because what I find is a lot of us don't necessarily think that we're wealthy. But I'm going to challenge you and say you are wealthy, not only just slightly wealthy, you're like top 10% of wealth in the world already. You are one of the wealthiest people in the world simply because you were born in the United States of America. I went through a few of the top places in the economies in the world. There's top five, one biggest economies in the world. And what we see is this huge disparity. And I'm going to move my video up in the top corner. There's this huge disparity between the rich and the poor. So if you look at India, one of the largest economies in the world, look at these pictures over here. These are homes. These are where people live, not just one or two, but you can see here they're watching their little TV. That's a family of six might live there. These are actual homes. Look at over here. This is what slums in India look like. Do you notice that they build a house upon a house upon a house upon a house? And what I think is super stark is the wealth inequality in India is astounding. Here's on the left where all of these houses are slums. And if you look on the right, you can see where the wealthy live. But see, India is just a stark example, but this is every major industry country in the world. If you look, China, it's in China where there's both wealthy and poor. Yeah, I thought this was a cool picture here of the slums in the backdrop of a wealthy capital. You go to Germany, even a Western country that's one of the powerhouse engines of economy, and you find there's homelessness. There is these refugee camps. Look at down here, you can see these small little houses built upon each other called the projects, what we would call the project in the US. But see, the US is no different, right? Because we have huge homeless camps. We see homeless camps here in America where in the shadows of $1 billion or $1 million houses are homeless people. You go through Scottsdale, you go through Paradise Valley, you'll find that there's homeless right next to these $1 million mansions. Or we also have the projects in inner cities where people live in this. I once taught in a high school where one of the kids we were talking about things, and he had said that his house is currently held together by chains because the back had split off and they have to cross boards to get from the front room or from the top floors from one room to the other because the house is in half. That's poverty. They didn't have any money. You realize that exists in the United States as well. And even in Arizona, there are people, especially reservations. If you haven't been to one, go to one. You have to visit them and see. There are people that live in houses that are smaller than your kitchens, that they pile in together because that's all they can afford. And they live in Arizona without air conditioning, that they still have to pump water. Have you considered the fact that there is a ton of poor people in our country and all across the world? But have you considered that if you have a house, you are one of the wealthiest people in the world? Let me give you some really good details here. Okay. In 2019, the minimum wage was $11 an hour in Arizona. Now it's actually $12 an hour this year, but I didn't want to recalculate all my slides off of that. But if you made minimum wage in Arizona, let's say your whole family only lives off one person's wage and have $11 an hour, that comes out to be $21,000 a year. Would you consider yourself as poor, average, meaning like the middle 80% of most Americans? Would you consider yourself rich? Or would you consider yourself ultra rich? So which of those options would you be? If you're like me, I would say I'm either poor or at the very bottom of average, right? Because $11 an hour, $12 an hour is not much. It's a slow income. However, when you compare that on a global scale, a person who makes minimum wage in Arizona is actually the top 3 richest person in the world. Actually, technically, I calculated out 3.15%. There's 97% of the world makes less than you if your family only lives off of this one person's income. In Ghana, it would take a person 132 years in order to earn approximately the same $21,120. Consider this. What a minimum wage person in America makes in 1 year takes 132 years in Ghana. Let me throw this home a little bit more. In 2020, our Arizona minimum wage was $12 an hour. It turns out in the United States, the average dollars per hour was 24, or about 48,000 a year is the average hourly wage in the US. In Indonesia, the average worker makes 39 cents an hour. In Zimbabwe, it's 53 cents, and the Philippines, 25 cents an hour. I gotta look over to my screen to get the statistics here, but it says in 1 hour of an average person working, so making $24, you make 6 days worth of income of an Indonesian person. So in 1 hour, I make what they make in a week. Or if I work a whole 10-hour shift in the United States at the $24 an hour, so I made $250, $240, it would take a person in Indonesia 3 months of work to make that. It's why we have so many clothes manufactured overseas, because it's just cheaper to pay someone there. Now, if you were in Arizona and you work 1 hour, that's 3 days in Zimbabwe. 1 hour in the United States and Arizona at minimum wage is 3 days worth of labor. Think about that. You work 1 hour, they work 10. If you work a 8-hour shift in Arizona at minimum wage, it will take somebody in Zimbabwe 1.5 months to make the same amount of income you made in 1 8-hour shift. Do you see why I said I think you're one of the wealthiest people in the world? Because people in the United States make so much money compared to the rest of the globe. Now, the average salary of a Arizona public school teacher is $48,000. This was last year. So I was like, okay, well, I'm kind of curious what all those numbers come out to be. If your family makes $48,000 a year, you're in the top 1/3 of 1% of all people in the world. Meaning you are in the top 1% wealthiest people in the world. That same amount of income could pay for 182 doctors in Kazakhstan. Or it would take 302 years in Ghana to earn that. Or approximately, it just goes out the numbers with it. But the idea is this. The average salary of a teacher, if that's the only income for a family of 4, puts us in the top 1/3 of 1% of wealthiest people in the world. By being born in the United States, you are the wealthiest person, one of the wealthiest people in the world. Now, all of a sudden, you start going up, and if you really want to, fascinating. I wish I could. This was from a website called theglobalrichlist.com. Unfortunately, it doesn't work anymore. It went bankrupt or whatever this last month. But you just start doing the numbers. You double that, and all of a sudden, you're in the top 0.15%, right? And you can just do the numbers quickly. But what's amazing is your family and you are the wealthiest people in the world. And yet, the question is, do we give any of that wealth away? You see, because he talks about this guy, Brother Paul, having sold his blood. He wanted to go do a projector and wanted to share the gospel so desperately that he went to the hospital and he sold his blood for months over and over and over again as he could to save up just enough money to buy a projector to share the gospel. Consider that. This guy would sell his own blood so that people could hear the gospel. And yet, are we willing to even give up a Starbucks to fund the gospel? Are we willing to give up anything for funding the gospel? It's one of those things that we are the wealthiest people in the world, yet we don't really focus on the gospel. The last thing I wanted to just, that really struck home with me, I'm going to see if I can read maybe a little bit of it. It was on page 40 and 41, if you've got your book, chapter 4. And KP goes through and he describes the luxuries a typical family has to surrender if they live in the 2/3 world. 2/3 world is just another way for like a third world country or a developing that we use. But he talks about this and he goes through this and he says, now look around. And what I'd like you to do is just go look around your bedroom really quick and take it and see what's all in there, or kitchen, or wherever you are in your house. If you really wanted to understand what poverty looks like in most of the world, as I share this a little bit, just look around and start taking things away. So the very first thing that you would need to do is to take away all the furniture in your room. So that's all gone. Take everything off the walls because you don't have clocks, you don't have that. If you've got a computer or a laptop, all of that goes. You definitely don't have a bathroom anymore. That's gone. You take your bathroom out because you don't have indoor plumbing. So bathrooms and showers are gone. Your cupboards, if you have food, all gone, all empty. Electricity no longer works, or if it does, it's just replaced by one outlet in your room. You don't have a cell phone anymore. You can't afford a cell phone. That would be ridiculous. You should open your closet and imagine all of the things in your closet are gone except for one pair of shoes, one jacket, one shirt. That's it. And as you look around, make sure you take the furniture out. Your bed's gone. Your desk's gone. Any sort of entertainment systems are gone. And you're just left with basically a bare room. And if you'd like to, you can put on the floor, you can actually, I'll give you a nice little thing. You can take a blanket and put it on the floor for your bed. And that is what poverty looks like. By the way, also realize that your whole family is going to fit in that one little room with you. So you're going to get 4, 5, 6 people in that room, and that's where you're going to live. Oh, and if you're in quarantine and you're supposed to stay indoors all the time, that's what you guys are all going to stay indoors, no furniture, by yourself without running water. How do you think that's going to go? Right? Like, that's going to be a lot of fun. Heck, you can hardly stay, friends with your family in a house that big. See, this is what the most of the world's lives look like. And even if you've got a house with 4 walls, you're doing pretty good. Most have dirt floors. See, most of what we consider poor in America would be considered wealthy or rich in others. And who we consider wealthy in our country are astronomically the top 10, 100 people in the world. But I want to just chapter 4 to realize that you are the wealthiest people in the world. He made this comment about the fact that the European and North American families eat more meat in one meal than most families in Asia eat for their whole week. And there's so much truth to that, because if you go over on missions, they're gonna sit down and then put in front of you beans and rice. And after about 3 or 4 days of this, you're gonna go and buy your own food because you're hungry and you're tired, and you're gonna like, oh, but do you realize that they're making sacrifices for you to just give you that little bit of food? Because in most of the world, you don't get these like pizzas and lasagnas and fancy meals. You get in the morning, you get soup, maybe water. For lunch, you get rice and a piece of chicken if you're lucky, if you're wealthy, but mostly just rice and beans. For dinner, you're going to get rice and beans for chicken and one chicken wing. And that's what you're going to get every single day. You wake up, you get maybe a piece of bread. Second meal, you get rice and beans. Third meal, rice, beans, chicken. Repeat every day for your life. And so I just want to challenge you. We are one of the wealthiest people in the world. And I could talk more about food. Maybe I'll talk more about it. Well, Cuba, and I was just there. We were there and we were visiting. And I said, "What's the hardest thing about Americans coming?" She says, "Because you guys go and buy ice cream, and I've never had ice cream in my life. I'm a 28-year-old woman, and we can't afford ice cream. And you guys are just buying ice cream left and right just for fun." And I sat there and I was like, wow. And so we treated her to the ice cream, and she was so excited. But imagine not ever having ice cream because you can't afford it, right? And so I just challenge us that, and he challenges us. We as Americans, as Western citizens, are the wealthiest people in the world. And that's chapter 4. We'll head into chapter 5 here in just a second.